so we need to chat again. Hey everyone, I'm Abbey Sharp. Welcome to Abby's Kitchen. I did want to pop in here again because the other week I uploaded a video about me not identifying myself as a body positive dietitian that I subsequently removed. And a lot of you reached out to me after the fact telling me that you really loved the video and you agreed with it and you wish that I kept it up. But I removed it for a few really important reasons. First of all, I just felt that it was misconstrued as a direct response to an article that I referenced in the video, although that was actually not my intention. I also just felt like I did a total crap job articulating all the angles of this really complicated, controversial topic. And I still don't really understand everything, so this response here is really just going to build on my knowledge, but it's ultimately just a series of questions more than anything, and is not really me trying to suggest that I have this stuff figured out, because I don't. I also actually feel really bad because it did appear in the video that I threw my colleague John from Obese to Beast under the bus, and that really was never my intention. I mentioned in my video that he struggled reading the article that I referenced on his live YouTube video, not knowing that he has a learning disability. But the only reason I even said that, and it was an off-the-cuff remark, was really just to point out how challenging the article was for all of us, hence why I mentioned myself that I read it like a million times and I still didn't digest it all. John read and responded to it live, and that is honestly something quite amazing and not something that I could do. But John is a really intelligent guy and I respect him a lot, so of course it was a rude off-the-cuff statement that came out totally wrong, and I did apologize to him both publicly and privately, and he's actually going to pop in shortly to chat, so stay tuned for that. But ultimately, I just feel like in general, I didn't check my blind spots, which I am really upset and disappointed and ashamed about because I generally try really hard to do that. But I think it just shows me how much work I have to do still when this was not necessarily all top of mind for me. And I realize that I have the privilege for it not to be top of mind when for so many others, this stuff is always on their mind. So I'm working really hard to change that. So thank you, as always, for the helpful reminder. So I want to share with you a lot of the thoughts from that previous video verbatim again, but also insert a few additional considerations and clarifications throughout. This attempt also includes some conversations with some larger bodied and BIPOC friends of mine to hopefully bring their perspectives to the picture. Ultimately, I think that these conversations are going to be scary and uncomfortable and not easy. That's probably why I unconsciously just didn't tease some of these more difficult topics apart in my original video attempt. Probably because I was unconsciously kind of scared of messing up and being called out for it. But I realized that I'm okay with being called out if that means that I learn something from the process. You know, it's all part of this messy learning experience of helping us better understand inequalities in this world. So ultimately, I am putting myself out there to your criticism, knowing that even with a redo, I will inevitably still mess up. I will still probably not see all of my privilege, and I will use the wrong words and not get it right. But I'm willing to take that chance and open myself up to the scrutiny to hold a place here for this really important dialogue. So let's talk. About a month ago, while I was doing my pseudo-mat leave, I read an article called The Unbearable Whiteness and Fat Phobia of Anti-Diet Dietitians by Marcrisel Mercedes. And it really kept me up at night. Basically, this essay suggested that white, straight-sized, aka thin, anti-diet dietitians were appropriating the body positive movement for their own financial gain. In the original video, I read off a really long excerpt from the article, but I do encourage you guys to read the article yourself. So in an interest in time and to try to keep this video succinct, I'm going to shorten the quote a bit, but you can of course read it below. So the quote was, "I'm mad at the anti-diet dietitians' ADDs that sit in their photos to show their stomach, read skin folds. I'm mad at the ADDs that feign eating desserts or pizza or something equally demonized for pictures that they post with captions like, 'No foods are bad,' or 'You don't have to work out to earn food.' I'm mad at the ADDs who say that you can still love your body and want it to be smaller. I'm absolutely pissed at the ADDs who stand in their mirrors or on the beach to display their minor bloating or the small dimples in their thighs. The white-hot rage I feel when these women tell me to flaunt my body, that I'm still sexy no matter my size, because they're sexy at their size in the position that they feel fattest in. If you are an anti-diet dietitian and you do any of these things, brand my words into your mind. You are diet culture. By portraying your miniature rolls and folds as things to love despite their existence, despite the way they distance you from perfection, you are not only saying that my fat body is inherently worse than yours, but you are subliminally communicating that rolls and folds are only okay and normal and sexy on a body like yours. So thin, so white, so unbearably conventional. Again, please read the full article, which I'm going to be linking below, but I thought I would share some of my thoughts with you. I'm being totally transparent that I have not figured this all out yet. I'm literally still in talks with myself as a person and as a professional about where I stand in this really messy world of dietetics. But I'm human and I'm not perfect, and I would really love to hear your thoughts in response to mine, so let's have a candid conversation. In my previous video, I referenced the body positivity movement and fat acceptance movement together, stating that it was started by Black women in the 1960s to encourage women to celebrate their body as it is without shame, while also advocating for more equal treatment of fat bodies. Now, this past week, however, I did do some additional digging on this, and what I realized was that the body positivity movement and fat acceptance movement are not one in the same. The body positivity movement was actually birthed from the fat acceptance movement of the 1960s. The fat acceptance movement focused on the culture of fat shaming and discrimination against people in larger bodies. Now, I believe that the body positivity movement emerged much later, possibly sometime in the late 90s or early 2000s, to really focus on the acceptance of all bodies, regardless of physical ability, size, gender, race, or appearance. But while it does appear that it was started by Black women as a response to society's fear of size and racial otherness, it's since become a movement almost solely defined on social media by white, thin, beautiful women. It's also become a massive buzzword used largely for marketing purposes by corporations looking to sell their products under the guise of inclusivity. So I understand the frustration of Marquiselle Mercedes, who authored the article that I quoted. It's totally understandable that she would feel edged out of a movement designed to uplift a certain population, who are now, once again, kind of pushed to the sidelines. Meanwhile, white, thin, privileged women like me are left to benefit from the cause. And that's not fair. I don't want to all lives matter a concept that I really do think is so important. Because if it's important to me, it's surely so important to the people living in the bodies for whom it was built to serve. So I do believe that I need to make more space for that. And if that means avoiding the use of the body positive hashtag for my own promotion while still supporting its tenets, I think that makes absolute sense. Side note, I will just say that I actually don't think I've ever necessarily referred to myself as a body positive dietitian, and I am very much aware and hesitant to share photos of my body or discuss my body in general without like a million disclaimers, knowing that it's definitely a privileged body. But still, I do think I may be guilty of this indirectly or unconsciously or somehow by association with my ties to intuitive eating. So that brings me to a question that I've been asking myself with regards to this whole body positivity isn't for thin white women issue. And before I get into this list of questions that I had asked in my previous video, just a reminder that these were honest, innocent questions. I was in no way feeling attacked or threatened by the article that I referenced, nor the idea of me being pushed out of the body positive space. Again, unlike a lot of my colleagues, I don't think that I've ever actually publicly identified myself as a body positive dietitian, so I don't have a whole lot to lose in giving up this title, nor am I really defensive about that. These are just innocent questions that come up for me and for other white thin dietitians that I've spoken with while grappling with some of these issues. I'm just saying them out loud in a ultimately very vulnerable space, knowing that a lot of you may have these same questions too. Is there a weight cutoff for when it's okay to talk about body positivity? What if I'm recovering from an eating disorder and, showing my belly rolls, for example, feels like a huge leap or accomplishment? Or if we look at intersectionality, what about its use for women who are fat but who are white or a dominant race? I don't have answers for these, but I think of this similar to how some of you often ask me the question, what is the cutoff for health at every size? At what point does a higher weight actually become unhealthy? If you asked a HAES advocate, they would probably tell you that there is no official weight cutoff, and that you would use the same counseling methods and encourage the same health behaviors regardless of whether or not someone was 150 pounds or 550 pounds. And that brings me to some other questions, largely inspired by my colleague Abby Langer's blog post, which again, I will link below. But I often wonder, what is it okay to do or not to do to exhibit body positivity? So by some people's standards, things like intentionally trying to lose weight by dieting or exercise or having weight loss surgery or plastic surgery would not be acts of body positivity. But what about other ways of changing your body, like dyeing your hair or getting eyelash extensions or Botox or acrylic nails? I guess my question is where is the line drawn, or is there a line, period? None of these are meant to be criticisms of the movement or concept of body positivity. They're just questions that I don't have answers to, maybe because I don't know enough or I don't understand enough. So to ensure that my voice is not the most dominant in this space, especially because clearly I'm not an expert here and I'm just a student, I'm just learning, I wanted to ask some of my colleagues about their perspective.
So how do you define body positivity and who is it ultimately for?
I feel like body positivity has really changed over the years. When I was first introduced to body positivity was really for fat individuals, or it was really taken from the fat activism movement.
I think body positivity has really taken on a different definition than it had originally started. So a lot of people have asked me that. And I didn't really know that when I picked the handle for my Instagram account. It sort of dawned on me after I got a little bit more popular, oh.
And it was really started by Black queer individuals. A lot of the research that has been done, to my knowledge, it was started in the late 1960s. I think the thing is that it started from an activism movement. How we see it today, that's clearly not what it is. It's not an activism movement. It's more of just anything can be body positive. I am existing in my body, and that is body positive. What it was and body positive that we see it in its iteration today are not one and the same.
I think body positivity is for everyone, and I define it as, I like to go back to the roots of body positivity that came out of the fat acceptance movement, getting it back to the marginalized groups that it was intended for: Black, brown, queer, non-binary, getting it back to them. But originally it's for everyone, but it's really to support and to help marginalized people in marginalized bodies feel like their body is still celebrated and feel like it has space in society.
Body positivity, I hope, can be more inclusive and not just for certain, communities, or even just for women. I think body positivity is for everybody, since we live in this world that's constantly telling us that our bodies should be a certain way and we are not valuable if we don't look a certain way. So I think really everybody gets that message. So I think body positivity is for everybody, even though I specifically speak to moms.
Do you consider yourself body positive?
I mean, I think definitely it was a journey for me, absolutely. And I've been really vocal on Instagram that I became a dietitian because I was so obsessed with food and weight. I became a dietitian because I was absolutely not body positive.
No, I don't. Only because while I have some marginalizations, I do not feel like my body necessarily needs to be the poster child for it. I like to leave that for people who genuinely their body is not celebrated within society. So people in larger bodies, much larger bodies, people who are disabled, queer, non-binary. I feel like their space, they need to be amplified. And so I don't necessarily need to amplify myself in that space.
I've sort of moved away from body positive. I don't consider myself body positive. It's not wording that I identify with whatsoever. I would say that now I consider myself a person who identifies with the words body neutral, and I'm for fat liberation. I consider myself body neutral because I have good days in my body and bad days in my body. So when you say you're body positive, that means that you're positive in your body all the time, which I don't think is a thing that exists. Who is positive in their body all the time? That's just, no, that's unrealistic. There are days where I'm going to feel really shitty in my body, and there's some days where I'm going to feel hey, I look awesome and great, and I love the way I look. In terms of fat liberation, it means that I am here to liberate fat folks from the oppression that they face day in and day out.
How do you feel about influencers with stereotypical good bodies posting about, insecurities and things like that using hashtags like hashtag body positive?
I think it helps people who looks like them, but I think for the sum total of the movement, I think it's harmful because we understand that algorithms praise people that are in these sort of stereotypical thin bodies. And so it's pushing out the people who are not celebrated and sort of catapulting the people who are already celebrated.
The thing is that so often these influencers come into it with like very good intentions. I think everybody has body image issues, and I don't want to say that like, oh, these people don't have body image issues, but I think where the problem lies is that so often we're trying to pit my issues are greater than your issue. And the thing is that people who are fat, disabled, trans, we're facing greater marginalization than somebody who is like maybe thin and white.
It really depends on the message, because even I get comments or I read about myself when people write about me and saying like, oh, she's not even big enough to be talking like this. What do I need to look like in order to like promote a positive message? I think for me as a dietitian, I have the ability to speak more broadly, you know, to this, but I do find it kind of harmful when somebody is posting pictures that are very filtered, muscle definition, and then saying like, I'm body positive, because I think you're kind of going against what body positivity is, you know, being more of like a natural, normal, not filtered image.
And do you think that the term has evolved to the point where its original meaning is like completely lost and it would need like a complete major marketing campaign to bring it back?
I think that it has taken on something that it definitely wasn't intended to take on. I think for a lot of people who are pushing back against body positivity, they see it in more of a light as promoting obesity. And I think that they are just so far off with that. So I think, you know, body positivity still seems to be like one of those vague terms that people can kind of use to, you know, promote whatever message they're trying to promote. And that's what I don't love about the term right now.
I think the moment we can associate body positivity with a brand and a particular look, I think it's lost its thing, right? And almost to the point that body positivity has become an aesthetic of like, oh, I'm this BOPO person. I like dress a certain way. I fix my coffee a certain way because that's like a BOPO thing, instead of it being like, I am celebrating the body for the fact that it's a body and not for the way that it looks.
What are the aspects of it that you do really like?
I almost feel like it's like this rising up of like, you know what? We are not going to look at these Victoria's Secret models and say we need to look like that, or our bodies don't count, or like once we become moms and we've gained weight or we've gotten stretch marks or whatever, we've aged, that all of a sudden we are not as beautiful as the 20-year-old beach model.
Thank you all so much for your thoughts. I'm going to be linking to everyone's websites and Instagrams below in case you want to check some of these folks out. Now, I also want to bring on my colleague John from Obese to Beast, who also made a video about this particular concept and the article that I referenced. So I wanted to get his perspective as well.
First of all, John, I did want to apologize. I really am sorry. I know I told you this on email, and I honestly did not ever mean to insult you or make you feel stupid. I have a lot of respect for you and for your intelligence, and the fact that you could even read and respond to that email live in real time, I think says a lot. I could never do that myself. So again, apologies.
Because I watched that video live, right, on stream, and I had no idea what to expect. And I think for me, like I said it later in the live stream, was like, I don't think you're malicious in what you were saying, but I was just responding with my gut feeling, right? As for me, I grew up in special ed and stuff, and you hear the word struggle all the time. Like, you just hear it, and it becomes this word of like, oh, you know what I'm saying? If you didn't struggle with that, you are a genius. Like,
I agree.
It's like, you're a genius.
You obviously have experience living in a larger body. I mean, Obese to Beast, that's your whole platform. Do you think that body positivity would have been helpful to you then?
It's an interesting question. And I don't want to say, it's like one of those ones where it's more in the gray area. I don't want to say yes, and I don't want to say no, because I know where I was at 20 years old. I was almost 400 pounds. I struggled a lot with just being afraid of dying. That was the main reason why I decided to try and lose weight. So it wasn't really even I'm not happy with my body, and that's why I'm losing weight, because I want to change it, right? It was like I was 20 years old, afraid to be home alone, because I was like, what if something happens and no one's here, right? It was less, I wish I could shop at more stores, and more, I'm genuinely afraid of what's going to happen in a month, or what's going to happen in 5 years. I'm not going to say that maybe being a little bit more happy with where I was in my body might have made me a little bit happier, but I don't think it would have changed the trajectory of the decisions that I made to decide to end up losing the weight.
Now that you are in like what I would consider a fit, socially desirable body, do you think that body positivity as a movement or as a concept is helpful for you now?
The words body positivity mean something totally different than what the movement is now. So
Yeah.
the words body positivity, dude, are you kidding me? I think anyone and everyone can be part of that and can feel empowered by that. Because you look at crazy level athletes and they might have some stretch marks, or they might have some roles that maybe they're not super happy about, right? And they can say, hey, I'm body positive about this, even though I'm a high level athlete, like it doesn't bother me, right? But now my biggest issue and my biggest struggle is it seems like body positivity has been taken hold by a certain group of people, and only certain people are allowed to say that they are body positive. So there's other words that people will throw around like body neutrality, but I personally think it's overly confusing what body positivity should mean. My first video that got super viral that like changed my life was me showing my loose skin after losing 180 pounds. Okay. So I still have that loose skin and I still talk about it, right? I still call myself body positive. And I personally don't think that me doing that is taking body positivity away from anyone else. What I struggle with is people like me are now getting attacked is such a strong word, but are getting accosted and being told that we're not allowed to use that anymore. More than anything, it just is so confusing. Yes, I think everyone should be body positive. I understand where people are coming from on the other side, where it's not just the words, it's more the meaning, but I just feel like the vast majority of people aren't going to be able to make that distinction and understand that there are two different things.
Do you feel that, like, knowing that historically the body positive movement was designed to help liberate oppressed bodies, largely fat Black women, do you think that today it's wrong for others to use the term?
I personally don't think that it is. I've seen a lot of different places claim that they are the start, like they are the reason that body positivity started. I've heard that one a lot. Like I'm not discrediting that at all. Like I've heard that a lot. But I've also heard a lot of people say, "Oh, it was for burn victims or people that were amputees that were missing limbs, and they were like, body positive because of this." But for me, I think what matters now is where we are in the current space and like understanding, especially when we look at Instagram, when we look at all these social media platforms and how many people struggle with not feeling perfect. And the reason they don't feel perfect is because they're editing crap out of their photos, right? They might even be getting surgeries, which there's nothing wrong with that. But it's like, if that's the standard that you are trying to get to, it's like, come on, man, it's just not realistic. So even if there's someone that's 400 pounds and they see someone that is maybe in a straight size body, a body that's more desirable, but they're still struggling with having rolls or having stretch marks. Like, I think it's crazy that someone that might be at the bigger end of the spectrum might feel like attacked or might feel like they're being belittled by someone else trying to feel positive about their body. A lot of it comes down to comparison. And I think that it's people comparing themselves to others. So it's that person that might be 400 pounds or might be overweight, comparing themselves to the person that might be in a straight size body, by being like, well, you're not as big as me, so you shouldn't struggle with this. But it's like, dude, just because they're not as big as you doesn't mean that they don't have their own struggles, because then it turns into who is having the most struggles. And then no one, the biggest problem for me is then people feel scared to even say they're struggling with things. Like, this is something I struggle with just in a lot of aspects of my life. I've gone through times where I'm afraid to talk about any of it because I'm afraid someone's gonna be like, well, I don't have a job, or well, I do this. And I'm like, I mean, I see that, but it doesn't change the fact that I'm struggling as well.
Yeah. I think those are all really valid points. And I totally feel you on like the job thing or other privileges that we have in our life, and how so often, yes, we can acknowledge that we have that privilege. To me, it comes down to just like making a quick like disclaimer. I acknowledge my thin privilege. That doesn't mean that everything is so easy. And it doesn't mean that, I can't acknowledge that I have those struggles or that I have those hard times. So I think those are all really valid points.
Okay, so that brings me to the honest thoughts that I previously shared on who should be using the body positive label or hashtag. I think where I've landed on this right now is that a lot of this comes down to language and also understanding the difference between body positivity as a concept and body positivity as a movement, and also what is the movement's purpose. As Marquiselle Mercedes said on the Food and Heaven podcast, body positive movement is not about loving your body. It's about freeing people from historically rooted oppression. This was something that previously I don't think I really fully understood or grasped. The concept of body positivity has evolved so far from that, thanks largely to social media, that even I don't think that I was fully aware of its original intent. And if I don't always keep that top of mind, I would assume that the public, seeing these Instagram posts of white, thin women using the term, likely don't either. I think that yes, in an ideal world, we should all be aiming to love and respect our bodies, oppressed or otherwise. We are all susceptible to body scrutiny and pressures to look a certain way, privileged or not. I realize that it's exhausting for us to performatively kind of love our body all the damn time. That's just not reality. And I also know that in the past, I'd called out Glaude, for example, for not reading the room and acknowledging her thin privilege when talking about her dissatisfaction with her body when it is a socially desirable body. But it's now kind of like gauche to even mention when you're feeling vulnerable about your body when it's not a bad body. I've realized that while we can all feel these things and even express these feelings, because again, we all have these pressures and diet culture sucks, period, it's important that our voices are not always the loudest, and also that our privilege in this conversation is acknowledged. So yeah, I do feel that in these cases, a simple disclaimer can really go a long way. You know, thin privilege is something that I acknowledge and talk about regularly on this channel, so much so that some people have called me out on it, thinking that it's total BS. It's not BS. But whiteness is another privilege that I do believe I need to acknowledge more often. That's definitely something that I'm personally working on. Now, most importantly, I want to say that while I think it's important that we all work towards respecting our body and fostering positive beliefs about our body, even communicating that if you are thin and a white influencer, it's also important to acknowledge that it's a hell of a lot easier for someone like me to find body positivity without a movement behind me to support me, when my body is praised by society by default. The marginalized bodies for whom the body positivity movement was originally intended for do not have that same privilege. So for those of us who do live in privileged, socially desirable bodies, that is thin, white, and able, we maybe need to take a step back from the body positivity movement to allow its original intended benefactors to shine. We can and we should still be allies and still support the tenets of body positivity. But when it comes to our use of the movement for our personal gain, let's say for marketing, it perhaps needs to come with a different name. A colleague of mine, Rebecca Scritchfield, uses body kindness, for example. Other ideas are body neutrality or body respect, body love, body freedom, body confidence. These might better articulate what we stand for without encroaching on someone else's really important territory. Okay, so moving on, and again, a reminder that this video is not a response to the article. I actually had other messages in the original video that I want to articulate, so I do want to repeat them again here because they help to express my professional views and how they've ultimately evolved over time. I do not believe that all intentional weight loss efforts or changes in diet with a desire to lose weight are examples of disordered eating, poor body image, hating your body, or mental instability. I do not think that diets intrinsically lead to eating disorders. There are subsets of the population for whom engaging in any kind of purposeful restriction is going to be problematic and unhealthy physically and or psychologically. But there are also a lot of people who can count calories or get on the scale every week or cut out certain food groups or use a dieting app without it impacting their mental health. They can do these things for periods of time and then, let them go when they aren't working for them, rather than obsess to the point of it taking over their life. So if you find that some of these things work for you and this is what improves your physical and emotional health and sense of happiness, then you should feel empowered, not ashamed to do these things. Now, second, being fat does not mean you're unhealthy. But we do have evidence to suggest that excess weight can play a role in some health issues: blood pressure, blood sugars, joint pain, infertility, heart disease, cancer risk, kidney and liver disease, sleep disorders, etc. Like I said before, to deny this would be an insult to people with this lived experience and also to the research. But weight is just one variable or risk factor for any disease, and thin people suffer from these diseases all the time as well. However, thin people are often offered alternative treatments that fat people are not, because the medical system tends to see a large body and just sends that patient away to change it. So a lot of HAES proponents will say that the data linking weight to disease is due to weight stigma in the healthcare system and therefore poor medical care. I would say yes, that is absolutely happening, and it probably does play a devastating role. But I don't think that the excess weight itself is completely benign across the board. So I think unfortunately we see a potential health problem, aka being overweight, turn into a larger health problem when equitable and fair healthcare isn't accessed. Third, I've said this before in my video here, but I believe in meeting people where they are. Even though I know that most people who try to lose weight will gain it back statistically, if this is what an individual wants to do, I fully respect that and I can get on board. I fully appreciate why anyone would want to lose weight, especially because living in a larger body in an aesthetically driven society is surely really uncomfortable. So I think it's important that as a nutrition professional who ultimately wants to help people, that I hold space for those conversations rather than just shut them down and push them out. And while my approach will always be to focus on health promoting behaviors while letting the weight kind of do what it will, I think it's still important to work with a client and to work with their goals. And finally, to reiterate and of course conclude, as I have no lived experience in a marginalized body, the body positivity movement is not for me to use for personal gain. And again, while I haven't really made body positivity part of my personal marketing, I agree that some of us maybe should refrain from monetizing from it by calling ourselves body positive dietitians. Body freedom dietitians, body confidence dietitians, great. But maybe we just have to mute our use of that hashtag to let those who it was originally intended for be heard. So I will make space for those bodies that need to be uplifted and will support from the sidelines. Again, I acknowledge we all have body struggles regardless of size, shape, or race, and all of those struggles are valid. But we can create our own movement to explore these while leaving the body positive movement to those who need it most, whether that be those who are fat, Black, LGBTQ, disabled, or other marginalized populations. So friends, I think that's where I'm at, and I'm not done. I'm still learning, and my opinions and beliefs will probably change again. It would be a lot easier for me to not address these issues or to like pull the wool over my eyes and pretend this is not an issue. But it's obviously weighing on me heavily, and I think it's a really important discussion to have. I mean, the YouTube wellness space shouldn't just be about vegan smoothie bowls and keto fat bombs. We need to be talking real issues too. And on that note, that is all that I have for you guys today. I really want to hear what you have to say. And also, please be kind in the comments. This one was admittedly a really hard one for me to articulate because I often feel really vulnerable being in the middle of what I often see as opposing ideologies. You know, the HAES folks and the weight loss folks. But if you like this video, please be sure to give it the thumbs up. And also check out the links to some of the folks I interviewed today below. And I'm also going to be sharing a list of larger bodied or BIPOC creators below so that you can check that out in your own time. Also subscribe to the channel, and I will see you next time on Abby's Kitchen. Bye.